watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Anabelle Bugatti, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified EFT supervisor and therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. We're welcoming back to our show one of our favorite EFT trainers, Jim Thomas. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he is the head of EFT in Denver in Colorado in the United States. And he is just really one of our most favorite trainers, and we've done a few videos on the channel. If you haven't caught them yet, make sure that you do see those. And what we're going to talk about today actually is how to apply EFT to your personal life or to your life outside of session. Basically, how to practice what you preach both in and out of session. And so thank you again, Jim, for being back on our show.
Oh, thank you for having me, and a lovely introduction, and I appreciate it. And I enjoy chatting with you. It's nice to, it's really, folks, like we're going to have a sort of informed, vulnerable dialogue between, we're two people who are asking this question of ourselves too, not perhaps as sort of the experts on how to do it, but like,
that's right,
we're in the midst of it too. And
and
I think this is under thought of and under addressed and stuff, and it has aspects of like therapist self-care. Who are we out in like the social political world? Can we be? Should we be? Are we supposed to be? And also, I hope we touch on in our time together, you know, how we think about our professional relationships, like community and stuff. What does our model have to teach us about that? And where does it make sense to go outside of a therapy model, right? Think about like a relationship that has professional aspects to it.
Yeah. So in this way, we're sort of going to like try to step inside the model and embody our core values and sort of try to use it from the inside out. You know, usually we're on the outside helping a client do this, but, you know, and part of the way this came up for me, it really, and this goes across a lot of different dynamics, whether it's having a spirited conversation on Facebook between, you know, two EFTers who have very different political views, or, you know, I've heard therapists go to like trainings and say, oh, this is our values for EFT, but how come I see so-and-so in leadership not using these skills? Because this whole thing like blew up and fell apart. Or needing to have a vulnerable conversation with your own supervisor or a supervisee or difficult colleagues that you come into contact with. You know, how do we really be able to, you know, so what really the first initiate on this for me was, you know, having to have a conversation with a supervisor in EFT and saying, you know, being able to bring up something vulnerable, right? Because I was at an event and got what looked like a rejection cue. You know, it was the very like that critical look, that, you know, the Viper death stare, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, the same ouch, the same initial appraisal, and you know, the bodily response of perception of, and like Magda Arnold's emotion model, and I'm in it.
Yeah, so then I'm recognizing I get really anxious, and you know, I want to repair, and sometimes I don't always trust my repair that it was good enough. That's that anxious attachment.
But you wanted to repair feeling rejected?
Well, so first off, my initial response getting anxious was to get really defensive and a little bit pissed. Honestly, I was pissed, and I was like, hey, wait a second, this is before I became a supervisor. So they were sort of, you know, what I would consider a mentor, or somebody who was in leadership over me. And it was just felt so hurt. And I just, you know, I have very sensitive cues to rejection from, you know, I guess you would say figures that I consider mentors.
Right. This would be, if we just pause for a moment, because I don't want to take you off of this, but I think it sounds like you have some emotional self-awareness and stuff. So I won't distract you too much from what you're saying, but to give some frame here for folks, one of the things you're talking about here from the person of therapist training, you know, Harriet Ponte's material would be like a signature theme. Anabelle, have this signature theme around, I'm very sensitive to rejection cues from people you know, and probably this, I'm guessing, you don't have to open up to
authority figures.
Yes, this could also include, you know, parents and family, or times when you need your partner or something to be wiser and stronger, and you
Yes.
feel to, yeah, I thought, you know, you're my mentor. And but
Yeah.
I think so one is just, if we don't get to it, we'll come back to it, is this is, I think, a very useful thing in our use of self and our understanding of self, is that we have these signature themes around vulnerability, and signature strengths, you know, that we keep going back to, and the wonder of sort of when our signature vulnerabilities flip into being signature strengths as a therapist and a person. But other thing I want to comment on is that you had a real ouch, right? You had like this is the thing where we therapists aren't immune to this. In the office, when a client suddenly turns and says, "This therapy is BS today. We need tools. You're worthless."
Yes.
Yeah, I'm at a workshop or something, or in a discussion, and I get a look or something, and I don't know how to read it, or maybe something more direct, ouch, to, yeah, I'm on Facebook and I'm just enjoying myself in social media, and suddenly somebody's saying, "You're stupid," you know, which we do on Facebook. Somehow on social media, we treat people like in ways we never would sitting around having coffee, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think, you know, part of knowing the model and what we teach is when we're with the client is we try to help the client own their moves. So part of my stepping in the model, especially in this case and across the different dynamics where it's pinged, was understanding my own fight or flight responses. Like, okay, what's happening inside of me and why did this happen? Oh, I got a cue, and the cue was this potential rejection. So I'm appraising it and instantly noticing my, you know, my threat cue and saying, how could this person who I respect so much not see that they were being so hurtful? But then also I stepped into their shoes in the model and said, what do I know? What does EFT and attachment teach us about behavior? Oh, maybe they felt threatened, and that's
oh
why
my gosh,
they did.
That's brilliant. This is wonderful. You went from like EFT, as Sue might say, you know, she'd have her accent, EFT, you know, where it's like emotionally focused individual therapy. You kind of, you said, hey, what's happening to me here? And it's okay. I can have some compassion for myself. I have these raw spots around rejection. It's in like, just like healthy couples and families, they start often with an anchor, you know, there's some hurt or something, disappointment, and anger comes so fast. And so slow yourself down, and at some point, I love that. That's brilliant. You said, so could I put myself, you know, in their shoes? In their shoes, and you were able to, which is really nice. It shows some flexibility, right? That maybe they were threatened somehow.
And when I was able to do that, a lot shifted inside of me, and I felt a lot more relaxed. And that's where I really felt like I embodied EFT was, you know, we're trying to teach people how to see each other, right? And we know that when people react in a way that's hurtful, it's often because they're hurting or they're getting a danger cue. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that doesn't invalidate the hurt that I felt and that we can't deal with it. But it's also to understand that sometimes I also think that we have this perception that our mentors or our peers or people we think are an authority in the field are immune to imperfection or their own humanness. And they also get rejection cues. And it never occurred to me before that a trainer, for example, could actually receive threat cues from little old Joe Schmo.
Oh, right? Oh, so I can tell you honestly, you know, I'm presenting and things, and there's a part of me, you know, it makes sense with this amygdala and other parts of our emotional brain scanning the environment. Is this good or bad, scary or safe? And, you know, sometimes the hardest in the trainer role is when it's felt really good and really safe, and you feel really, you know, you're with people, and there's, you know, 20 or 30 or 60 or however many people or core skills or something, and it's feeling, and then boom, out of you know, for that me or that trainer, you know, out of the blue comes a like, arg, you know, or ooh, or can't believe you said that, or you're that was, you know, or, you know, and then things like, you know, really, you know, serious things like, oh, that felt sexist what you said or something. That was so, you're so critical of pursuers, or so critical of withdrawers, or you don't understand this kind of couple. And yeah, so that's really quite, powerful and lovely that you could slow down and say, what about that person? And I call it pedestalizing. And I have to own my tendency, right, of going all the way back, a little kid, putting parents on a pedestal. In college, my favorite professor went up on a pedestal. I only had her for a semester, so she never fell off. That was nice. She stayed on the pedestal. She's still up there, right? Didn't get to know her well enough for her to disappoint me, right? I'm mad. I just think sometimes, what's the pressure on Sue? Is she to meet the needs of some 5,000 members of ICEEFT or something, or how many it is nowadays, and how many hundreds of people that come to trainings, and then she has to communicate like via email and things, and is she trying to talk, I'm just saying, hey, as family, here's where I'm kind of at, versus do I have to be careful because it's as if I'm the Prime Minister of Canada and everybody's reading my every word, the Chinese government might think I want to go to war if I say this versus that, right? And
like we're looking to you for cues of safety too, and
it's a cycle there too, right?
So in my application, I was really trying to at first understood what happened to me, but then trying to just step into the model and recognize what does the model teach us about human behavior, and that allowed me to step into their shoes, which realized, oh gee, if and this actually, and another example actually happened at an externship, and I tend to have a big mouth. It comes from a good place, but I like to volunteer unsolicited information because, EFT is the gospel and I love to spread the word.
Yeah, you're super excited. You're engaged, right?
Yeah, but, it's not always wanted. And, I got the look from a trainer.
I thought I had my phone off. My apologies.
You're fine. So, I got the look from a trainer at one point, and I was like, oh, shoot, I felt terrible, and I felt all this shame, like, oh, I did a really bad thing. And then I realized, wait a second, again, I stepped into the trainer shoes and thought, well, gee, if I was up there as the expert and I had somebody offering this, maybe it could sound like, oh, trainer, you don't know really what you're talking about. I know better. Let me stick my big foot in there. And I realized, oh, gee, I could be sending a danger signal to whether it's my supervisor or my trainer. Wow, they actually need to feel safe from us too.
Right, and it's reciprocal. It's got a reciprocity to it, right? And we can misread cues, so you may not have been sending a threat signal, but it was read as a threat signal, and vice versa. To give that grace. This is what I think you're saying. I call it like the grace of EFT, which it's that combination of the humanistic element. The people are doing the best they can with what they know, and everyone has raw spots and signature themes and sensitivities. And just because I'm a trainer or a supervisor or been in the EFT community for 6 years and you've just shown up for your first meeting, we all have these things, and there's nothing in EFT that's going to sort of get rid of them. We become hopefully better able to pay attention, to sit in our initial reactivity, to share, to get support, to feel secure. That's the blessing of it, right? And so I think also the grace of EFT that comes from the systemic, contextual, remembering, that person's got their own pressures and things, and they've got their own, everybody carries an equal burden and struggle, and the trainer struggle or the supervisor struggle or the certified therapist struggle or the brand new, I'm the only African American in this externship, and I don't know, and I feel welcome, but there's no mention of skin color, and I don't know if I could ask about it, and somebody just came up and said, I'm really so glad you're here, and I just want you to know, as a trainer, if I engage in anything that feels, like dismissive of your experience and stuff, I want you to be able to say something to me, et cetera, like, oh, and I relax a little bit or something. So this grace that you're giving of they're just a person too, and we all have these roles and responsibilities, and they could get threatened too.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really quite, powerful application of the model.
And then you bring up a really good point, which is the other half of that. And some supervisors or mentors or trainers are really good at opening that door and saying, hey, there's an invitation there that if I've dismissed or sent a threat cue in some way, I hope you feel safe talking to me about it, which community, I hope that I've built that with all of you too. But the other step is if that person hasn't necessarily opened that door, or there's been a danger cue that does feel really painful, how do we approach our supervisor or our colleague or our trainer and say, hey,
oh, that's powerful. That's a great question. I want to say, I in prideful moments, because I've spent a lot of time from very early on. I think we talked about this when we were talking about working with marginalized populations in another talk, right? That somewhere, I remember when, so long story short, my parents divorced and I moved between the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade, and I moved from a predominantly white West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue University to Lima, Ohio, which was about 35% African American and 60% white, and a small Hispanic population back in the 70s. And I just had this conscious awareness. Is probably, I'm also growing up hearing like Dr. King on TV and stuff, the civil rights movement, and I started thinking even at a young age about how much of my experience has to do that I'm white and I'm a male and I'm tall rather than short, but I'm skinny and I have buck teeth, I don't have braces yet. And there's all these things that I don't know why, but I just had this sort of anthropological, social, weird awareness, and some of my friends would talk to me about it and others would be like, you're nuts, we're just people. And I think, so I kind of, I'll pride myself on, I want to open all these invitations, and I'll feel like I'm really trying to open invitations, and then I fail, and I don't do it adequately, or don't come back to it, or I did it in the last 3 trainings, and I'm kind of not conscious of it at this training. And I can tell you that honestly, some of the most painful experiences I have as a trainer is when I realized I didn't make it, I didn't make enough invitations for people that are maybe dealing with trauma. I didn't make enough invitations around, can we talk about aspects of being female in this world, or I didn't make it safe enough for maybe trans or whatever that is, these things that and so I think that the trainers, we all want to be welcoming and inclusive and respect these things. And so the first thing I would say, and I'm going to build off what you said, I would give the grace that, I was just with all my buddies in Ottawa, just came home late last night, and I'm thinking of all of these folks, and so what I would say, but specific to the EFT community, the grace of saying, look, I'm going to assume that this person that I'm feeling a struggle with, I'm not sure I've got an invitation, they wanted to give an invitation, to assume that maybe they just missed it, or maybe it's not a thing that they put as much thought into, because I think so they tend to approach in a way that's personable and soft. Make your protest if you need to, but make the protest, reasonable to the situation and the relationship you have, which is where I start thinking about EFT might be more useful sometimes in these circumstances than EFT, because that presumes an intimacy that we don't have with each other in these situations, right? And to trust, and also, I hope this is useful, but the other thing I think about is, trainers and supervisors are trying to share an understanding of emotionally focused therapy, which has cultural and contextual factors in it, right? And we're growing in this. It's sort of like EFT's been around long enough to sort of have these second and third layer of writings and research that can start to come along around you know, how can we apply EFT differently in this culture versus this culture, or with, you know, in gay and a relationship is what's different in the same, or what's different in the same in a lesbian relationship. And that we as trainers are, we're not coming in as experts. Some have it, but we're not coming in as experts on things like diversity and cultural competence and social justice. We're coming in an investment in EFT. But the stance of the organization, and it's in that first statement at the externship on that slide, you know, that we're welcoming of all. We want to embrace all, and so I think that's the other piece of advice.
I think part of it too is sometimes like people, even with the best intentions, don't realize that they're sort of giving that closed for business sign, or that, you know, bugger off kind of, you know, look.
Well, let's take that out of like specifically trainers and stuff, because it'll kick up my loyalty, you know. And then so let's just in general talk about it, right? That like,
yeah,
general,
like, you know, if
what
like,
you do in your professional life, you know, or
right.
personal life, when you're trying to show up from this vulnerability place and say like, hey, what's really happening here, or ouch, or
to say like, hey, that felt really critical and that really hurt, and
say that again.
How to even come to that person, whether it's your supervisor or a trainer or whoever, and say, hey, that felt really critical to me and that really hurts. Can we have a conversation about it? You know, it doesn't always feel like the easiest thing to do, especially if they are in a position of authority. Like if they are your supervisor or a trainer, it feels a little more daunting, even though, you know, I hear you saying that, you know, trainers and supervisors, we're all people too, you know, and we want to be open, but sometimes, you know, I think a lot of us like to think we've done all the work, but sometimes it's clear not all of us have done all
works in progress. Well, that brings me back to my recovery self, you know, and my, just that sense of, you know, progress over perfection. We're all works in progress. Well, I don't want to sit and slow down for a moment about that, because maybe that's the most, just exploring this in a quality way. Maybe we'll have another conversation about other aspects of this. Is I think sometimes maybe emotionally focused family therapy would be more useful in these situations, because it brings into play, you know, that maybe the relationship is reciprocal but not necessarily mutual or equal, you know, that there's like a father or mother has a different place, or a grandparent, or an aunt and uncle, and big brother versus big sister versus middle child, and that we somehow like have, like, you know, that we all think about, where am I in the system, you know, and maybe we look at that person walking into, you know, in your Las Vegas community that you such a key part of developing, right? That so maybe as a leader, you're looking around the room at these people coming into the externship and saying, who looks vulnerable, you know, who may be vulnerable just looking at the situation, you know, like, yeah, if I walk into the room and there's 3 Latino people and 38 white people, maybe I want to raise my awareness that could or could not be, you know, a threat signal or uncomfortable or something for those people, or who look shy. I mean, look, if you're a more extroverted person that'll get vulnerable and share, is a much different, and it's a different experience at an externship or core skills than if you're a very shy introverted person. Maybe same for trainers. Maybe that's part of it, you know. Maybe this trainer at this point, you know, maybe at a break, coming up to somebody at a break and saying, hey, I just want to tell you that look you gave me, I got triggered, or that comment you made, it offended me. It's maybe like, let's just stop for a moment, and maybe it's something like at the end of the day or the next morning to say, at some point, I would really like to process something with you, and I don't know if, you know, we can do it right now. Maybe it's something we schedule. Or you know, I want to process something with you, and I want to tell you, if I don't process it with you, it's going to be difficult to stay present with you, you know, as a trainer, which might be a really, you know, kind of a, and in what situation are you in? If you're in an externship or a, you know, class with 90 people in it versus a core skills, like, then maybe we all sort of share some mutual responsibility for looking at those factors. But I also think sometimes it is like, maybe people's first response is they're overwhelmed too. I really have been, I so appreciate the people in my work life and personal life who've pushed past my first defensiveness or denial, or, you know, I went like, you know, no, I didn't do anything, I don't know what you're talking about, or I'm busy, and came back a second time and said, look, this is important to me, and I want to have a good collegial or a good mutual working relationship or a good friendship, or my wife, you know, all these different levels of, maybe it takes a second or third time. And then I also think, you know, that in EFT, we're trying to help people share these things softer.
Mm-hmm.
The other is, you know.
Yeah, so don't come at them with guns blazing, right? You did this to me, how could you?
Yeah, and attacking their character, you know, making, I mean, I've had people in my life, and I'll say, before the EFT world, so it's like, you know, it's an administrator and a supervisor in places like Denver Children's Home and the Tennyson Center. It's a really awful thing when somebody comes at you, you're trying to figure out, what did I do? I want to know what felt like sexist to you, or felt racist to you, or dismissive to you, or I stigmatized you, or I labeled you, or I ignored you, or whatever that thing is. And I'm wanting to, like, sort of, what I want to lean into it. And as I'm leaning into it, the person's telling me about who I am. The person's saying, and you are this, and you think this way, and you're like this. And it's like, hey, if we shoot bullets at each other, we shoot bullets at that person, and then, you know, maybe you're going to get the armor back, or you're going to get, like, let's all just sort of take a breath. These are professional relationships.
Right.
I remember I used with my teams a book called Breakthrough Teamwork back in the 90s and early 2000s, before I left administration work. And in Breakthrough Teamwork, in a work setting, anger was just the direct expression of anger, and using anger to communicate. We just said, you don't get to come to, like, Denver Family Institute and yell at each other. You don't get to come to the Tennyson Center and yell at each other. And so maybe we have to do that too. And I think this is a point I want to make for myself. And I think sometimes it's like we want to operate the values of EFT.
Yeah.
But we can't, we need some support. And I'm just thinking out loud about this myself as I've been preparing for a talk. We need some supporting ideas from maybe sort of like business relationship, professional world stuff, that what's different and similar, right? We're all vulnerable in this. We have raw spots. We want to have bonds with each other. And that's why I think the EFT maybe is a transitional thing to think about, that we have the idea of, like, you know, Gail and Jim Furrow and Lisa and George, they keep pointing out that even the bonding events don't have typically often, they can be very intimate, but they often don't have the sort of intense intimacy of the bonding event of a couple, right?
Right.
And maybe it's sort of remembering that
there's still an attachment need there. Like, it could be, you're my mentor and I really want to be accepted and respected by you. Like, I know my role, like my role in our dynamic. I know my place and I know your place, but still need to feel safe. And that felt really terrible when I felt like this person I admire the most just sort of gave me this rejection signal.
Right. And then there, if it's literally your mentor, like, you're supervising me, or you're you know, you're mentoring me in the community or something, versus I come in and I'm taking a class from you, and then I'm going to go back, you know, and I might, you know, this is sort of, but I do think, you know, we all have a responsibility in this, I guess, is what I'm saying. And mine, and I also think personally, I've always thought, you know, I used to consult a high school, Shining Mountain in Boulder, and I consulted there for 16 years. And one of the things that they said, remember Jim's rule? And I was like, I think I probably learned it from somebody else, but the hierarchical difference comes out when there's conflict.
Right.
You know, the informal power and stuff comes out, and you know, and I want to take responsibility, you know, for my part in things, and but also,
well, really, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I just think I'm thinking about this, I think I want to sort of go philosophical or meditate around this question maybe we have to ask ourselves about.
What it sort of sounds like you're saying in some ways is that, to really embody the model and the core values of that and attachment really means, again, continuing to make sure that we know ourselves where we are in terms of building safety with others.
True.
That, even when we're in a mentor-mentee, supervisor-supervisee, that the mentors and supervisors or trainers aren't immune to humanness, and they certainly get danger cues and respond to those, but it's also equally vulnerable to approach somebody, no matter how safe they are, who's in a peer dynamic or a sort of a power differential where you're, someone in authority and I'm below you in the spectrum. To be able to say, hey, I didn't feel quite safe there. Can we have a conversation about that? And I love how you suggested, can we process something together? And I think always with our couples, even though it's a little bit different, between couples versus, like what you said with families, and we're all looking for that safety. And being able, like what we teach our couples too is, how to check it out with each other, right? This is sort of how I read that. That's sort of the signal I got. Did I get that right? Did I miss something? Kind of with that, softer approach versus guns blazing, and poking and protesting.
Right. I think it's a complicated thing, because even as I'm sitting here, I find the part of me that starts to go, no, wait, you're an EFT trainer, and just like the supervisors and certified therapists, you said that you want to live these values, and then as a trainer, I'm an official representative of ICEEFT, and am I speaking ICEEFT policy right now, right? So it brings in like this line between what's personal, Jim, what Jim Thomas, this person with this name Jim Thomas believes, and what does Jim Thomas therapist believe? What does Jim Thomas, who's supervised and done clinical supervision and administrative supervision and things, believe? What does Jim Thomas the trainer believe? What do my colleagues believe? And I think there's this part of it, right, that these are professional relationships that often feel very much like family or and close friendships. And some of them are, right? We do get these relationships.
And I often kind of think of some of my mentors sort of like my parents, like my very first supervisor. It's like my parents in this way, like a mother hen or something. And I so much want to be respected by them and get their stamp of approval, because they don't feel like I'm doing it right.
Right. So like me, if like Sue says, really nice or something. I mean, I remember once when I had written this article about lean in and linger, and somebody went to like San Francisco and saw Sue, and it was shortly after it got published in the newspaper, and they said, Sue said, Jim Thomas has this lovely idea that you lean in and linger, and I got all the like oxytocin and vasopressin, my insulin warmed up. I'm like, yay, and after Sue goes, Jim, I'm not so sure about this, right? Like, if Sue can, soothe me, and then Sue can steer me, and if a trainer can soothe me, they can, and I gotta, humbly, and I could list, I want to be somebody that you can come to and say, can I check this out? I want you to be somebody that can come to me and say, I didn't like that triggered me. I want you to be someone who can say, you could give me feedback and say, I think you get in a pattern, and you kind of push people away, or you're too hard on people, or you're, and I know that in this journey, in my, 32-year journey as a therapist, I've developed relationships with a lot of different people along the way, and I've healed some breaches, and those are some of the best moments in my career. And there's ones I haven't healed. There's ones I don't even know about. That people maybe just sort of say, oh, you remember when Jim did that? And there's ones I tried to heal, or they couldn't repair the damage. And I think we all carry these things around. But what I want to come back to is this reminder that these are professional relationships. We kind of went down more of the route of professional, what a professional relationship looks like, and how can we apply EFT and EFT and EFT and humanism and systems thinking into our professional relationships. And
well, it's really like self of the therapist in the world, even as we're
in the work world, I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, even still, because a lot of us, especially in the EFT family, there's a lot of nepotism, right? We tend to stick close and even socialize with other EFTers because I think we just feel a form of acceptance with other EFTers that we don't.
Yeah, it's a concept, I've been reading about a lot, homogeneity, that we have a tendency as a human to hang around with like-minded or similar.
Right. So even though it may not be in the office, we could still be socializing with a colleague. And one of the greatest examples where this also pinged, and you mentioned, you brought up something similar earlier, which I thought was really good, is like, if we're on Facebook, and this is something that even you and I have worked through, but it actually brought me really close to another EFT trainer where, we were socializing on Facebook about having different political views. And of course, how heated and passionate those things can be, and our amygdalas are firing off and we're like, oh my God, danger! And, feeling like judged and evaluated, and it can feel very different. We don't realize that even when we're socializing on Facebook with people who are mentors or supervisors, that we're still watching and we're still looking, and we're looking like, oh, are the content of your post, like, that feels real judgy. And I feel like that could be a slam against me. And hey, you're supposed to be safe and not be doing that kind of stuff. Where does that show up in here?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant transition, to go from the professional world of like EFT communities and trainings and these kind of things, and my work world experience and stuff where, and there's sometimes people become really close friends and become part of our family. But I think it's good to remind ourselves we're not family and friends generally. We're in this professional, supportive, mentoring, training relationship. And I think some of the ideas of EFT can't directly apply. We have to get contextual a little bit and put it in perspective. But now you're transitioning to this talk about like, how can we be out in the social world and the political world, and what does it mean? And like APA has written some stuff about this, of like, what's the responsibility, for example, of a psychologist, right? Can you just go on social media and be yourself, or because then your clients could go see yourself. And if I want to canvass in my neighborhood for an issue, like, let's build them all. I think it's good for business versus let's not tear down those trees. That would, and it's an issue, do we build a mall here or a shopping center, or do we keep the trees? And an argument can be made for both. And EFT in and of itself does not have a view about whether there should be trees or a shopping mall here, right? But if I knock on the door, and my client answers the door, I didn't know they lived there. That's a different thing, isn't it? If my clients these posts because I made them public on social media.
Well, and I think where this intersects too in the professional world is, as they say, when we're practicing what we preach, that attachment is never ending, and attachment relationships don't stop just because you change settings, just because you're no longer in the office and you're not at a training, you're still interacting with people. And I guess it's sort of that intersection of, if we're supposed to embody this, shouldn't that also show up naturally in the way that we even post, things like on Facebook, when we're getting ready to, maybe poke and jab at concepts or things that we don't agree with, which there's something that we're all passionate about, and, what was really helpful for me is I found a couple different EFTers that I'm friends, and guys, sometimes this is why I'm careful about who I also let on my Facebook, because I do like to do posts that are more personal, and I don't know if everyone's like going to agree with that, and I don't want to be rejected, and I don't want them to feel unsafe. But me and another EFT trainer were on the same post, and things got kind of heated, and we were able to like apply EFT and talk about like my amygdala's firing off.
Oh,
Or,
cool, cool.
Is this what you're
that's
saying?
lovely. Yeah, yeah.
Like we're checking it out with each other. And then we were able to have a more communication offline and talk about like, this is what was coming up for me, and this triggered all of my past trauma, and these are the trauma that I had. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had some similar trauma. And
That's
and then
that's beautiful.
yeah. So we went from having this polar opposite political view and things getting really heated to working through the process, and other people were witnessing this and they're like, man, I wish more people could like solve their problems this way.
That would be nice. That'd be like Bill Doherty, who does get some people from this side and that side together for the weekend, and let's remember our shared humanity.
Yeah. So and then we were able to take it offline and be more vulnerable and be like fast friends, and now we're BFFs. So it was really awesome.
Well, we need more of that in our world, right? But it's an interesting concept. You said attachment, there's attachment, relationship never ends. Mm-hmm. Does it mean that, so if you're an attachment therapist or theorist, then when you're
those
posting,
values,
you're
posting
posting
in us,
you're posting on your personal, sort of social media, and you say,
like if we know attacking is
I am in favor of X, and I'm really struggling with people that are in favor of Y right now, and here's why.
Right.
That I have a responsibility that could be triggery in my.
Well, it's sort of like, sometimes we can fall into assuming we know where other people stand because they may believe something that they do.
Like other country, the United States, and it's happening in other countries to various degrees. This is like this thing about hostile attribution, right? If you're on the other side of the political aisle, I assume you're out to destroy. And then the angel attribution that on our side, we're doing the right thing. Yeah. Boy, and it's so similar to, couples when they get in a real bad way, right?
Right. That's right. So being able to, to feel like, hey, like, I feel like, that post is attacking me. Like I fit into this other side, and that's not really where my heart is. And one of the ways that I've learned to sort of overcome this with people is to really see where their heart is at. I think that's sort of what EFT teaches, is that at the end of the day, look at where a person's heart is at. Their strategies may not be effective in that or getting them there. Attacking or calling everybody racist or this or that or the other is not necessarily going to build connection and help us come together as humanity. But
or vice versa, saying that liberals want to take everybody's money and turn us into communist Soviet Union or something. It's just like why are we going to such extremes with each other?
Yeah,
that polarization, right?
Yeah. So and it's not fun, posting things about where my heart is and then being called like a Russian troll and that kind of stuff. It's like, you don't even know where my heart is. Like you haven't even had a conversation with me. So I've learned, just to really slow it down and, because again, these.
You're passionate about this, right? You're wanting to do something different.
As my religion and attachment, it's like these values don't just leave just because we're not in the therapy room. It's like if that's who we are and we really embody, and it is firmly a part of us, as we love to throw around and say at trainings, then it truly should be in all parts that we do. So I've been trying to think about that even as I approach Facebook posts, and it's easy to make off the cuff jokes and but someone not.
So as you operationalize this in the real world, I hear what you're saying is sort of like you're sort of like channeling like Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who I want to see find something I like in each person I meet, and I want to say that to them, and I want to trust that people are doing the best they can and have good intentions. I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and let's try to get to the heart of the matter with each other.
That's right. And that's what EFT does, is gets to the heart of the matter. It's like, I may not agree with your strategy to get from point A to point B, but if both of us have it in our heart that we both agree on point B, then why do I want to go to war with you and demonize you about the strategy?
Right? And I do think there's some thing that we're all still learning. So let's apply that to how does this happen out there in social media, right? Let's apply put Fred Rogers' hat on and apply like EFT. And I can just picture, like, I could picture him if he was still alive and experiencing this, maybe saying on a, you know, talk show or something. But, you know, I think Anabelle, that perhaps when we're on our computers, we forget it's people on the other side as we type the words. You know, you could just sort of hear him saying that there's something happening here that our emotional brains and our intellects haven't caught up with. There's something about that we say things, and I'm 100%, you know, guilty of getting into like arguments with people on Facebook, and going back and forth around, you know, and throw, you know, and here's I have a fact and your fact isn't a fact, and doing it in a way that if we were at a coffee shop talking about it, I probably wouldn't be. So I do think that's something we're all learning about.
And I think too, if there were such clear-cut facts, we wouldn't be so divided, because there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and one way is not necessarily wrong or right, but there's emotional parts to this, and I think that's why it gets so heated. Is just
right. See, but I think now we're moving. See, this is the part. This is I think the question or challenge that I have for all this is, it's sort of there's other parts of life. Attachment is central. Attachment is important, and attachment to my, you know, family and friends, my attachment to my next circle, attachment to the people that I'm closest to in the EFT world, you know, start to go out, and yes, I like that. I like your call to action that we embody this in our lives. And my heart, but when I listen to my heart, says, you know, there's certain things, you know, if I brought content into it, you know, I said something like, I started to talk about climate science and global warming and science, there's science, right? And it's like, I think we somewhere, we don't have any fact base. We don't trust policy analysis about an environmental risk anymore. We don't trust economists. We don't trust people in Congress. We don't trust.
And we don't know who to trust or how
to trust. And, you know, probably the Russian troll thing comes from because, you know, people do troll out in social media. They troll, they want a reaction. They get some pleasure from getting an argument going. And there is vested interest in, you know, getting us stirred up. I mean, there's this, I heard this Google ethicist who talked about, you know, businesses make money out of getting us fired up. You know, it's an old joke in the Howard Stern movie where the guy comes in and says, oh, we figured out Howard's loyal listeners only listen for 22 minutes. And the guy that wants him out goes like, well, that's terrible. And 70% of the listeners hate Howard. And he goes, see, we got to get rid of you, Howard. And he says, and the people that hate Howard listen for 2 hours because their amygdals are fired up and they're like, I can't believe how offensive this guy is, you know. And there's bigger things happening here in this polarization. And this goes outside then. There's similarities to EFT, but now we're going into sociology. We're going into big data. We're going into...
But EFT and attachment teaches us how to build connection. And if the antidote to this connection with humanness in general would be connection. So it's, you know, how to use the strategies and step inside the model when we're just trying to build connection with other humans, even if we're not in a direct attachment relationship with them.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. And I think, but in social media, this is complicated, right? Because it's there's forces at work, you know, to like, there's algorithms. Algorithms aren't human.
Yes, that's right. That's right. They try to override our humanness to provoke some of the worst parts.
The fact that I'm on my phone and I'm mentioning something like I had to get a window fan, I've got my phone with me, and I don't type in a search for window fan, but window fans show up on my Facebook feed the next day, and like we're all caught up in a lot of stuff. So I agree with you, but it's a tricky thing. I think when we start to apply EFT to politics, it gets difficult. You know, attachment to the political world. And
or just
I
anything
think,
that's, where two people just disagree, come together, because we see that in our couples all the time, is they
yeah,
come
I
from
absolutely agree with what you're saying about that. Like,
very different
I,
perspectives.
yeah, I love your story about how you resolved that. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I sort of view the political thing just as the content issue. It's, our couples come in and they come from two very different perspectives, and we're trying to teach two different perspectives, two different opinions to come along and still build connection. So if we can do that in our office, then surely the world could be a better place if we could learn how to do that with just other humans, regardless of how deep or intense our attachment relationship may or may not be with them. Right.
Right. I think for dyadic communication, or maybe if you're in a group and you're trying to talk something political, but the root of the board politics is about power, and political, who gets elected and who decides things has real impact for various people. And I think this is a sticky wicket to go into. Does EFT imply things around things like social justice, and what is justice, and who decides social justice?
Right. And I don't necessarily take it that far. I just sort of use the principles as how to, in the process of how to relate and bring together and just be tolerant and practice, being with somebody that may come from a very different perspective. And not
that's absolutely.
That's where I'm really bringing EFT into it, is how to just build connection with other people in a way that builds connection between our humanness, rather than getting caught on the content area where we could disagree all day long.
Right. I think what you're getting at is like Roger Ebert, the movie critic, who said empathy is the root of civilization. Right.
Yeah.
And when we lose empathy, we go barbarian pretty quick.
That's right. That's right.
Or Eric Hoffer, the author of The True Believers, back in the late 50s, who said, politically people move, and then they come around, and at the bottom of the circle, left and right, the anarchists from the left and right blow things up.
Right.
How can we come back and be with each other? And I think I like what you're trying to do, in your own life, to say, even these social media relationships and stuff, I want to be living from this thing that attachment is connection. I value connection. Yeah. First and foremost.
So we gotta unfortunately wrap this up, because I gotta go see my client. But
time flies.
This is really beautiful. So I just sort of want to tie a bow on this, guy. So really what we're talking about is, being able to continue to check in with ourselves and the people around us. Am I really being authentic about providing safety? If I really want to build safety with my community, with the people I supervise or mentor or train or whatever, am I aware of how I might send danger cues, or am I aware of how I might receive danger cues and what my response is? And being able to be, take the values of EFT and be in the other person's shoes and remember what we know about human behavior and what's behind triggered responses, and being able to be with that person. And sometimes there is risk taking, like we talk about with our couples and our families all the time, taking a risk to have a vulnerable and difficult conversation, checking something out and say, hey, did I read this right? This is sort of the signal that I got. I'm not sure if that's what you meant to send, but that was really hard for me. Can we process that? Really, really beautiful. And whether we're doing this with our professional colleagues in the office, or, our trainers at training events, or our supervisors or supervisees, but also out in the world when we're interfacing with people that come from a different frame of reference or have a different opinion, how we can still use the same, foothold in the model to build connection with just humans around us.
Right. Yeah. And I think for me, we want to, tie in the bow. I'm glad you said that, because I think what happens when I'm with a person, I'm getting these direct amygdala cues and things, and I'm having an emotional experience in a different way than this social media world. It's just so fiery. And so I loved your story about, going in and working through it with a person. And maybe that's something we have to say to ourselves is, you know, out here in this social media world, people are still having these amygdala reactive responses.
Right.
And
Right.
I do much better with it, even if I'm just sitting at Denny's and the counter and the person next to me says,
Right.
no, they didn't really land on the moon, and that was fake.
Right.
You know, I can have a conversation, you know, in a different way.
Right.
I'm online and somebody goes, you're an idiot. You think they actually landed on the moon, don't you?
Right. Right.
You know, and I'm in this sort of like debate mode.
That's right. That's right. And even we're still friends with our colleagues on Facebook. And when we post things, we're still looking to our mentors and our supervisors and whoever for signals of safety, even as we talk about, you know, issues that are fundamentally human, you know, forget political, they're just fundamentally human. You know?
Yes.
It's just about using EFT to show up for our humanness across the board. So Jim,
I have an
you're
idea for a
amazing.
guest for you. You should have Bill Doherty on. We'll email.
Right.
I've been talking about what he's been doing in these weekends. I think it'd be a nice follow-up.
I'll have to look into that. So if you can go ahead and just help us tell everyone where they can find you, what trainings you have.
JimThomas.care is probably the easiest to remember. I love the .care because JimThomas.com has not been available for years, and I'm not paying $8,000 for it. Be in October in Boston doing the externship, early October. Excited about that. I have been doing these wonderful, very small externships for just treatment professionals working in residential or wilderness addictions programs. And doing the externship for them. So if you're interested in that, I have one of those coming up in October. Just email me, but it's very strict that you must be in a residential program working.
And are all your trainings listed on your website?
Yeah, in Edmonton in November, and I'm still loving doing couples intensives and family therapy intensives, and work at one couple at a time coming here to Lakewood and working for 2 or 3 days. So those are probably the biggest things that are alive for me. Excellent.
And I'm going to make sure that we put a link to your website in the description for this video. So JimThomas.care, guys. And Jim Thomas is fabulous, and he'll come to your area and do trainings. So definitely email him, get in touch with him, follow him, go attend one of his trainings. They're spectacular. And make sure, guys, if you haven't checked out the other couple videos that Jim and I have done together on my channel, we talked about using EFT in agency settings, and we've talked about using empathy and curiosity in EFT, and we're already brainstorming some other future topics. So make sure, guys, that you check those out and hit subscribe because new episodes are on the way.
Thanks for having me. And thanks you all for listening.
Thank you, everyone.